All right, good afternoon. Welcome to November 1st. Here we are already. Thanksgiving in 3 weeks.
Whoa, so soon.
That was horrible.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Quorum's determined, and we'll declare the meeting open. Appreciate everybody being here tonight. I'm going to ask Council Member Sandra Melton if she'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation, please.
Please join me in the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please pray with me. Lord, I just thank you so much for this chance to come together, be able to make the decisions for the city of Sherman. And I just ask you to be with all the community, be with our community tonight after our fire in downtown. I just ask you to be with those business owners and their families. Lord, I just thank you so much for our first responders and for the other cities that came together to help put that fire out, Lord. And I just ask you to always watch over them and keep them safe. Lord, I just thank you for everything you give us and everything you've done for us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, thank you. All right, Council, we have minutes of the regular City Council meeting of October 18th, 2021. Do y'all have a chance to review those?
Move to approve the minutes of October the 18th.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you, Council. All right, we are to citizen comments. Does anyone have any comments for the Council related to the agenda? If not, we are to the consent agenda. These items are considered to be routine and will be enacted in one motion without discussion unless a council member or citizen requests a specific item be discussed and voted on separately. The consent items include E3 and F1. Would anybody like these broken apart for any reason?
I did have a question about E3.
Okay.
Quick question, but that's giving up that sewer easement. I know we needed easement for 1417 expansion. Do we already have that section?
I'll let Wayne
Okay.
answer that.
Okay.
Tom and Wayne are shaking their head yes.
Yep. That's all. That was it. Quick and easy. I assumed we did, but
Yep.
just thought I'd ask. Yep.
Move to approve consent.
Second.
Okay. Motion, a couple of seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent is approved. Thank you.
Who was the motion and second, please?
Motion.
Darren.
Second.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we are to public hearing. We'll open public hearing. Linda, if you'll read D1 for us, please.
Ordinance 6427, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sherman approving the 2021-22 Annual Service and Assessment Plan update for the Bel Air Village Public Improvement District, providing a repealing clause and severability clause, finding that the meeting at which this ordinance is passed was noticed and is open to the public as required by law.
Thank you, Linda. Clint?
So if you remember, council approves the creation of a public improvement district for Bel Air Village, and part of the state requirements is that you review and approve an annual service plan. And so this year it's pretty simple because there's no houses on the ground, so there's no assessments to be made. Next year it'll get quite a bit more complicated as they start building homes. We've got Josh here with Municap to kind of give you a refresher on the service plan and what exactly you guys are approving.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Josh Arndt with Municap. As Clint mentioned, the purpose of this report, it's required per Chapter 372 of the Texas Local Government Code that the Service and Assessment Plan, which governs the Public Improvement District, is updated each year, and there are certain components that need to be reviewed and updated accordingly. These are the 7 various items that we'll be covering briefly in this evening's presentation. And as he mentioned, the purpose of this presentation is really just to get you familiar with each of these components. There are not many substantial changes or adjustments within the report itself, but just to get council familiar with what will be coming, as he mentioned, in future updates. The first component is to review the authorized improvement budget itself. You can see in the third column from the right, budget changes. There are line item changes as provided by the developer. This is very common as these costs are constructed. The key that I would like to highlight is that if there were true cost overruns above, you can see the $7.168 million reimbursement agreement, those additional costs would not cause an increase in the assessments that the eventual property owners would be responsible for. Those would have to be covered by the developer. So if the actual costs of the roadway improvements, for example, went down, those cost savings could be recognized to help cover a potential overage in the water improvements. However, if there were additional cost overruns above that savings, like I said, those would have to be covered by the developer and would not result in an increase in the assessments to the property owners. The second item is just to discuss the status of development and home construction. And as of the end of August, at this time, the city had issued 0 building permits out of in the first phase of the PID. There are anticipated to be 327 units. And as we get into further items with the report, you'll see why the building permit item is highlighted. So one of the main components is to review the annual budget required for operations of the PID each year. This involves a principal and interest component, currently would be of the reimbursement agreement. At some point could be bonds if they were ever to be issued, but currently a reimbursement agreement, along with administrative expenses. You can see the 3 conditions at the bottom of the slide here. Those are the conditions that one of those would have to be met in order for annual installments to begin collection. And you can see the first one is there have been, issuance of a first building permit for each lot. So since none have been issued, that is why we have nothing to collect. But just wanted to get you familiar with the various components that would be in the annual budget each year, because that's ultimately, once it's approved, would be paid by each property owner through their property tax statement. Again, another slide just to highlight the various lots. So just at a very high level, a 50-foot lot would be responsible for a larger amount of repaying the assessment. So their annual installment each year on their property tax statement for the PID component would be a proportionally larger amount than the 40 or 25-foot lots within Phase 1. Concept being larger lots have a greater benefit from the public improvements, therefore are responsible for repaying a proportionally larger or smaller amount of the assessment. Next item to review is the assessment methodology. This likely, hopefully, will not change very often. One example of where it could is if the currently in Phase 1, there are 50, 40, and 25-foot lots. If there was a 1-acre lot that was contemplated, that lot type currently isn't in the service and assessment plan, so that would require an amendment to that to add that additional lot type. But if it was just a change of the mix of there's now a few less 50s and more 40s, that would not be a change through the methodology itself. Parcel subdivisions. The reason for this is determines how and who we bill and which properties are billed. So currently there are just a small handful of parent parcels. As those plats are recorded, we'll start recognizing and billing those individual properties. And the last item is assessment prepayments. If you recall, one of the key components of a public improvement district is that each property owner has the ability to prepay the principal amount of the assessment at any time. There's no penalty for doing that. And then they would theoretically save the future interest and administrative expenses that they would have otherwise incurred over that 25 or 30-year repayment period. That's not too common, about 1% or so generally, but they do have that option. And then once that's picked up, we would work with city and the county to file a lien release, and they would not be billed for future years. So just in conclusion, with the request for approval of this report, we'd be recognizing those budget updates to the improvement cost budget themselves, establishing the annual budget for the upcoming year. Again, this year, 0, because we have not had any building permits issued to date. Which would also establish the annual installment amount due from each parcel, and then updating the assessment roll, which is that parcel subdivision section. And with that, be happy to entertain any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll get with you in just a moment. Okay, is there anyone here to speak about this item this evening? Okay. If not, we'll close public hearing and consider the adoption of the ordinance. Council, questions, discussion about the service plan update?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council. All right, Linda, if you'll read item E1 for us, please.
Resolution 6798, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sherman, approval of guaranteed max pricing with Byrne Construction Services as construction manager at risk for the construction of a new police department headquarters facility. Finding that the meeting at which this resolution is passed was noticed and is open to the public as required by law.
Mayor, Council, I've been up here several times talking to them about several things to try to get us to this point. However, not being the expert on the pricing of this was exactly why we hired these fine folks behind me. I'll turn it over to them. These are our representatives from Byrne Construction. The police department, we've been working with them for several months now. I've been very pleased with the relationship that we've been able to build. And we're happy to be at this point tonight to be able to give you some pretty firm numbers, or very firm numbers. So.
Good evening. My name is Justin Burt. I'm a senior estimator with Byrne Construction. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our bid process and what it took us to get to this point here tonight to present our GMP to y'all. So we received the bid documents from Aaron and Hodel and his team back on August 20th. Up to that point, we'd been working several months with chief and assistant chiefs on budgeting, design development, and providing assistance from a cost standpoint to make sure that the building was as cost efficient and fit in the city's budget. So from August 20th, we took about a week to review the plans in more detail, even though we've been working on it for a few months. Put together detailed bid packages, which are scopes of work for our subcontractors to reference during the bid process, so they knew exactly what we wanted to bid on. Clears up any scope gaps or overlaps to ensure that we have good pricing. Then we had the documents out on the street for just about a month from that point. We publicly advertised in the local paper, and we also use our online plan room, which is called Building Connected, and we sent it out to hundreds and hundreds of companies. And from that, we received close to 200 bids overall from various bidders, mainly here in North Texas, but also other regions of the state and the country, depending on what the scopes of work were, how specialized the equipment was. So once we got our pricing in, which was on September 23rd, we were actually a little bit higher than what the price is in our GMP, but we took 2 more weeks to do further scope review where we had meetings with the low qualified bidders to make sure that their scope was complete, and we had thorough pricing and scope. We were able to actually get that price down to what is now the $15,497,320. So we really worked hard to make sure that we squeezed as much as we could, and we have a good budget put together. So. And I think Jason wants to talk a little bit about moving.
Hi, thanks, Justin. My name is Jason Moore. I'm a construction manager with Byrne Construction, and so I have general oversight of the project all the way from the pre-construction project process through construction and team. And so it's a big milestone tonight. We're excited, here in a couple of weeks get started. And so after today, we'll get a notice to proceed and signed by the city. And we'll immediately begin issuing subcontracts to low qualified bidders. Volatility in the marketplace, as you can imagine, the quicker we can get those out the doors and get materials sourced and secured, the better off we all are. So that'll be the first order of business, and then we'll begin mobilizing to the site, probably a couple weeks, to kind of get set up and rolling and start seeing some earthwork and, some foundation work and site utility work by the end of the year. And then probably the end of the third quarter next year is when you'll really start things going up in the air, and the average person going by the site will say, "Hey, something's happening here," and fruits of the labor. And so, and so construction will continue on, and then occupancy, I believe right now is slated for April.
So questions, discussion?
I do have a question. We've seen change orders coming in because we can't get products after we give. So what would happen if one of your guys are out there and you've got this document and it's all done and all of a sudden the price is raised? Are you going to come back to us and tell us that we need more money?
No, well, we are carrying a contingency within the GMP to deal with some of those things. We're also trying to anticipate, again, as I mentioned, the key is getting those subcontracts out now, getting those materials sourced, delivered. And so, that's bringing additional storage containers on site or whatever we need to do. That will be a big focus and goal of the materials here earlier. We will ask the city to go ahead and pay for stored materials in the contract. Hopefully that will eliminate a lot.
Like that, hopefully. I'm catching on. Thank you.
Chief, when you guys presented to us originally, I think it was pretty close to this number. I think it was 15, maybe in some change. Is that right?
Right. So we went through several different maturations of this process, and we were estimating that we would be around 15. And I had conversations with city management at times through this process that should we come in below 18, I'd think we were doing really well. And so the staff and I went to Burns Facilities when they had the bid day, sat there throughout the process, had conversations with them. We were able to give them expectations that we had and kind of how we saw things going, at least from the practical standpoint here in Sherman. They had a really good understanding of that, and Aaron actually came down and visited us with us as well. So we had the whole team there. And so when they were able to get the bids in, we were already able to have some input. And again, they had told us beforehand that they were going to do their due diligence, and the number we got that day was more than likely not going to be the thing that they brought forward. And that was a true statement. They stayed working on the project and were able to get it lower than we really anticipated, and we were very grateful for that. But I think that the whole team, Byrne and Hydell, working together to really understand the market and the needs of what we wanted here and what we needed here at Sherman on the front end. So we made a lot of value engineering decisions that would typically be held for later. We made a lot of those decisions on the front end to try to prevent any scope creep and any escalation in process and try to keep it within the scope of what we needed. So I think with all those variables, we were able to come to you with this price today.
When we were going through VE and the project, did we cut out anything that we needed?
No, we did not.
Okay.
This police department, in the words of Robbie, I'd say is the right amount of nice.
Okay.
We visited several police departments, which I think benefited us tremendously. And we really took the standpoint of determining on the front end the non-negotiables. What can we not do without?
That's good.
We made that decision first, and then we worked from there. And I think that benefited us tremendously.
Well, I'm impressed that the price from last year hadn't changed too much from what we were anticipating.
That's
So,
partly why I'm nervous.
yeah.
Well, we have worked on the contingency end to make sure that we have built some safety nets within the guaranteed price that you're seeing tonight to try to prevent that. And should something come up that was just drastic enough that we really had to make some sort of amendment, it absolutely would come before council for sure. But we tried really hard, and they had great guidance to be able to get us to that point. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And please note, for the purposes of transparency, I did not vote on that item. Thank you. Thank you,
y'all.
guys. Look forward to getting started. All right, Linda, if you'll read E2 for us, please.
Resolution 6799, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sherman authorizing execution of a professional services agreement with Freeze and Nichols Incorporated for engineering services for Phase 1 Lead and Copper Rule Revision Compliance Program Initial Screening, Compliance Budgeting, and Scheduling. Finding that the meeting at which this resolution is passed was noticed and is open to the public as required by law.
Thank you, Linda. Tom, how are you?
Very good. Thank you,
Good.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council. With the approval of this agenda item, we will enter in a contract with Freeze Nichols Engineering. We will initiate Phase 1 undertaking to perform initial screening needed to meet the EPA mandated lead and copper rules. Tonight, I have brought a engineer from Freeze Nichols for a presentation for y'all. James Naylor.
Mr. Mayor, Council, James Naylor with Freeze and Nichols. Do y'all need address for record?
Yes, please.
I'm going to cheat, use a business card.
Okay.
101 South Locust Street, Suite 202, Denton, Texas.
Thank you, James.
So the main point of tonight's discussion, we've got several bullets that we want to make sure that everyone understands, but one of the main items I want to make sure the council understands is that this is not a reflection on anything the city has been doing. The city's been doing what they needed to be doing under the current lead and copper rule. Things have been rolling very well with that based on the data that we've reviewed recently and in discussions with town staff. So I just want to make sure that was out there so everyone understands that this isn't a naughty list or a shame on anyone. So all retail municipal customers or retail water providers will be required to perform work under this act. And when we say retail, we mean if you're a wholesaler where all you do is you sell to other entities that sell water to on, it wouldn't impact them. But since y'all have retail customers, it's going to impact your operations. So we've got a few items that the municipalities are going to end up having to do under this revised act. And this act has been in development by the EPA for roughly 3 decades. So it's been in the works for quite a while, and it was finally rolled out with dates set. So the big item is preparing a lead service line inventory, so you know where the lead service lines are on the system. That's one of those that no more we don't know or it's an unknown. It'll start requiring folks to get out there and identifying where those are located. Updating a sampling plan. So you currently have a sampling plan and you're executing that, and you're executing it very well. But as we start learning where the lead service lines are, the sample plan will be shifted accordingly per the new regulation. Enhanced public communication, that's a big item where a lot of folks are going to be, and there's going to be more communication with city staff, city council, city management team, to understand where are we at, what's going on, and then sharing that information with the public. So going forward, there'll be additional communications going out to the public regarding this rule, regarding the findings. And a lot of that you're already doing as part of the existing rule, but this expands the amount of communication going out. So what this project does is kind of set up some framework to guide city staff and to provide some SOPs for city staff. Another is be prepared for a fine and fixed individual exceedances. So if there is an instance where an exceedance occurs, make sure the city has a standard operating procedure. If X happens, what do we need to do and how fast do we need to do it? Because there's going to be certain time frames, certain days that you'll have to react when you have data come back. How many days do we have to get out a notice? How many days do we have to respond? How fast do we have to react? And so that's what this is setting up, is how do we respond to these incidences if they were to happen? Then depending on data, as the data is collected over time, so this isn't something that's happening in the next few months. This is something that you'll be working towards for when the rule actually goes into effect and the regulation is you'll have to meet the rule completely, so you'll have to be in compliance. May have to develop a lead service line replacement plan. So once again, that's an SOP, standard operating procedure. If we encounter this, what do we do? And then optimize corrosion control. The idea is we want to find out where the city's at so that before the deadline hits, you're already ahead of it. You know what's happening, you know how to react. If you have to make a change, how do you make that change and how do you keep moving forward? And then depending on how the data moves forward over the next 2.5 years, there could be an increase in the lead service line replacement rate. And once again, that's all data-based. So what does the data show and how fast do you have to move on this program? Main thing is it's really good that you're taking the steps now to get ready for that. You have roughly 3 years to make sure you're in compliance, but it's ideal. You don't want to wait until the day you have to be in compliance and then say, well, we're not quite there yet. What do we do now? And so this is a big step to move in the right direction, and I'm really excited to partner with you guys on this approach. So the major changes, we've got the lead service line inventory that we've talked about. We've got the lead service line replacement, corrosion control studies, public communication, find and fix, and additional water quality sampling. So as mentioned, you're already doing quite a bit of sampling out in the site or out in the distribution system. So you actually take water from out in the distribution system, have that measured for lead and copper. And this will basically say, where do we need to change that? Do we need to add any sites, move any sites, or anything else? So if you're curious about the existing rule, for those of us in the water industry that start nerding out on regulations, I like to do a comparison on previous slide versus new slide. How does it compare? What are the changes? That's a great way to explain, especially on the utility side to staff, what have you been doing and how does it differ from what you have been doing? So the main thing is there's a trigger level. There wasn't a trigger level before, but the action level is the same. And you're going to notice 90th percentile. So everything in this is about 90th percentile. So that means that 10% of that data would exceed, 90% would be below that. So if you see a P90, we're referring to the 90th percentile. I was trying to keep the word count down. Under sample site selection, previously the existing rule that everyone's been operating on, including the city, prioritized copper lines with lead solder. This is prioritizing lead service lines. So the goal is to find those items and get them replaced. Sampling frequency, it's semi-annual with a reduction in monitoring. So depending on how the results came in, you could actually reduce your monitoring over time and with permission of the TCEQ. Or under the revised rule, it'll be dependent on what your P90 concentration is. So you can go semi-annual, annual, or reduced even further. So public communication, the big item for this, the takeaway is you're not in this alone. There's some entities that have been doing this for quite a while. An older city where they've had this type of issue for a while, and so they've practiced their communication. They've been building these type of presentations, and that's where we start stepping in to kind of say, where can we get this information to help staff? There's no reason to start from square one if you can say, how did someone else do this, and how do we build on that? And let's get some of that efficiency going. And so that's where we kind of start looking at some of the examples out there in the industry from other utilities that have been doing this for a while throughout the state, throughout the region, throughout the nation. And so you'll see that there's quite a few items that as the program moves forward, a lot of communication going on, OBGYNs, child care facility, midwives, all those locations would receive publications on the importance of the rule. So this project specifically focuses on phase one. So we kind of broke this into bite-sized pieces to help define what the issue is, what the data needs are. And that way, as phase 2, 3, and 4 move forward, it kind of limits that contingency because you don't have to sit there and say, well, we don't really know what the data gaps are. This part will help identify those data gaps. So as we move into the next few phases, city staff will have a really good understanding of what's required. So in this, we'll be doing a risk assessment, looking at all the data that's available on lead, copper, age of facilities, water quality data, looking at all that and finding out where are there gaps in the data. What's the risk to the city and the utility? Resource assessment, looking at where are there gaps that we need to identify and how do we close those data gaps so we get more information. We don't want folks having to pothole every single service line to find it. It's how do we use as much information as possible from city records, from plats, when items were built, and then we kind of funnel that down to where we have to do some field investigations. Scheduling, from here on, we'd actually identify the schedule to meet compliance and to stay on that just so that we're all moving forward, we don't lose momentum. Because this is a long-term project, so we're talking 3 years. And so setting those interim goals. And then budgeting, how does a city move forward? What's the budget implications so that in future funding and budget workshops, you're able to work this into future city budgets. Stakeholder communications, we've already highlighted on that, but the big items just to make sure that everyone understands where we're at in constant communication. That's one of the big things for me is two-way communication with city staff, with our office to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So as you'll see, we've got phase 1 that we've talked about. That's the risk and resource assessment. That's about a 3 to 4 month process. Phase 2 would be compliance planning. That would be future work. So anything beyond phase 1 would be future work. But that'd be compliance planning, developing additional SOPs and kind of planning the next steps. Lead service line inventory development, that's a 12 to 24 month process. And then updated the sampling plan would be phase 4 with a 3 month process. And then you actually have the lead copper mitigation, which is the last phase. So it sounds 3 years sounds long. Then you put it in a schedule and you go, well, 3 years may be a tight schedule. So that's where we're at, and that's kind of our path forward. So with that, I'll entertain any questions.
So this fee is just for phase 1.
Yes, ma'am.
So will be 5 phases at the same type of cost?
That's variable. You won't know what we're up against until the phase is completed. For example, currently, our lead and copper testing, we haven't had any services with occurrences outside of the 90 percentile yet. The absence of the data doesn't mean it won't happen, but if it does happen, it triggers other things.
Right. And this is why we have some citizens that actually pull samples for us
That's
to
correct.
check as well.
That's correct.
And each phase will come back to council,
Right.
similar
Oh,
to this, to say, hey, this is what we
Correct.
found in phase 1. Here's the next phase. This is what the cost is going to be because we know what that next step is, and move on from there. I mean, the lead copper inventory, the price to do that is going to be greatly dependent on what our GIS system and county records show as far as when houses were built, and years when lines were installed. So there's a lot of that stuff we can do to hopefully help reduce the fee in the future before we have to actually dig up stuff.
1985.
We can do our own types of research that will help.
Yeah, yeah.
Fortunately, I'm sorry.
So what was it in 1985? What'd you say?
So there's a set date, and it was 1988 is when the lead copper, or was when the copper or the lead ban went into effect.
Oh, okay.
And so the nice thing is we can actually go back
Power
through
to.
looking at city resolutions, city ordinances, and look to see, okay, when did the city adopt that? Was it earlier? Was it after? Was it around that time frame? And then look at that and say, okay, what was built after that?
Right.
And so that helps us identify where the high potential areas, and that allows us to focus. That way city crews aren't out there having to pothole a lot. That's not our objective. Our objective is not to create work for you guys. It's to figure out how do we use the resources you already have to fine tune and locate those areas.
I think it's going to be very important for we as a city to make sure that the public understands why we're doing this. After the national news runs those stories about the Northeast, where there are several cities where they haven't been able to use any of their own water out of the tap, my concern is that as soon as we say, oh, well, we're doing this testing, people will panic that there's something wrong with our water. So I want to make sure that we get the word out that this is precautionary, that we have not seen anything as a problem.
We currently already test monthly and weekly. I mean, Michelle over there behind Jim, she has two employees. That's their job, full time. They're going and getting sampling and collecting the data. And so there's already lead and copper and a whole bunch of other chemicals that we're testing for. We're in compliance on all of those.
Actually, don't we do more than is actually required right now
Yeah.
as a city?
Yeah, there's certain areas that we test more often because of data that we find.
Absolutely.
So we're in full compliance now. It's just these rules have gotten tighter because, in my opinion, certain cities
Yes.
can test in certain areas and not others because they know there might be a problem over there.
Right.
And that was the first question I asked Michelle is, we're not doing that, right? And she goes, nope, we're testing. We've got a shotgun approach to our test, and we're getting realistic data.
Right.
So,
But looking at the data, the city's doing very well.
And I like how you started off by saying it's not because we're doing something wrong.
And that, because it can be perceived as a very scary topic.
Yes.
It makes the news, but
Yeah.
and that's why I wanted to make sure that council understood that this was not a staff issue. This was not a city management issue. This was just a national movement forward from the EPA. The data has looked great from what we've seen. So.
And when you get in through phase 1 and finish that off, is that at the end of phase 1, you go, well, you guys passed the test and we don't need phase 2, 3, 4, 5? Or is that there almost always going to be a phase through 5?
There will definitely be a
Okay.
phase 2, 3. Now,
Yeah,
the
sure.
thing is, once we identify the items in phase 1, that allows us to sit down with staff and say, okay,
Sure.
how do we fine tune our future scope of work?
Mhm.
If we were to start now and say we're going to scope the entire thing, unfortunately, there'd be a lot of contingency hanging out there because we wouldn't know all the pitfalls. We wouldn't know all the data gaps. And so by doing it this way, the nice thing is we can fine tune that. And as we move forward, we can also spin off and say, okay, from a perspective of what do you need us to do? What is city staff comfortable doing? And we can start having those discussions on where we're at on those future phases.
Right.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion, a couple of seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, James, for coming up. Okay, we are to consider board commission appointments for the Airport Advisory Board. We have,
Got the names here, right?
She's got the names.
Okay. Good.
I recommend reappointing Bob Nunn, Ross Richardson, and Mary Lawrence, and consider the appointment of Nathan Wick,
okay,
to the airport board.
Second.
okay, motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, council. All right, we are to council comments this evening. Sandra, I'm going to start with you tonight.
Well, I appreciate that. I want to ask everyone to continue to pray for our downtown businesses. After their fire last night, I know there was smoke damage, and I really appreciate our community working together. I've seen a lot of people already saying they're willing to go down and help. I also want to reiterate that the city has not done anything wrong with this lead and copper, that we're just doing the best we can to stay on top of what's going to happen in the future. We know that we want to take care of our citizens. And I had a wonderful night at Fright Fest Friday night. I know we had at least 2,000 people come out, so it's amazing. Thank Parks and Recreation for being next door to me. As I ran out of candy, they ran over, so thank you.
Yeah, last week was a great week because on Thursday night, we had our merchants on Travis Street who did a wonderful job in a blustery condition. And so we want to thank all the citizens and their little ones who came out on Travis Street for trick-or-treating. And then Friday night, I've never seen such a line of people. It was exciting, and everybody was so well behaved, as far as I know. And we gave out candy nonstop for over 2 hours. So thank you very much for coming.
Just want to thank the water utilities for the testing that they do and the extra work that you guys put into it. I kind of followed that when I first came onto the council, so I've learned a lot about it, and the testing that you guys do puts us right where we need to be. So you guys keep that up.
Yeah, I want to just kind of echo what everyone is saying. Of course, by the time you make it to the end down here, I can just say ditto and we're done. But
Right.
The fire in downtown, if everyone here and otherwise can keep the companies and families in your prayers, I know it would be much appreciated by them. And Fright Fest was a hit, and I think this was probably the best year. The organization and how it was structured with the lighting and all the city departments contributing in that way was really neat. Of course, my daughter, again, we get stuck at the fire truck every time. She has to climb up and play with all the gadgets, and so we appreciate you guys being there as well. So that was fantastic. And I appreciate all the city departments who are on the lookout for these type of regulations that may be in the pipeline. I know it's water this time, but we see this over and over again from all of the city crews and departments, and we just appreciate you guys looking into the future and helping us make the right decisions now.
No comment.
All right, just a few announcements this evening. I want to thank our firefighters for the work they did to save Kelly Square last night. It's one of our most important historical buildings. It wouldn't be standing today if not for their quick and decisive actions. I think we were just in a few minutes of that thing just really being an issue. So thank you, Danny. Please extend the council my personal thanks for their hard work. I mean, those guys were on it. And a special thank you to our neighboring fire departments. I counted 5 neighboring fire departments helping us. There may have been more, but it was really an amazing thing to watch. Don't forget that Election Day is tomorrow, November 2nd. In-person voting will once again be offered across the street at the Sherman Municipal Ballroom, as well as several other locations around the county. There's plenty of places to exercise your right to vote. Finally, tonight, the Sherman Veterans Parade will be held on November 6th this year, all along Travis Street through downtown Sherman. There will once again be a flyover this year, as well as dozens of floats honoring our nation's servicemen and women. Make plans to come out at 10 a.m. this Saturday. All right, the council will now hold a closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.087, to discuss Heritage Ranch Master Development Agreement, Sherman Hospital Project, and Economic Development Project. So at 5:39, we'll recess into executive session. Thank you.